Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Dietrich.
And I want to apologize to all of you listeners for the fact that we're just too good. We've done too good a job with this podcast. And so I know that this is the last time you'll be listening.
Yep.
Right after this. So today, Ginny, we are going to turn to the Comedy Central of business advice, the Reddit small business subreddit.
Yeah, it is the Comedy Central of business advice.
The questions, the answers, there is much humor to be had.
There is.
There are some nuggets in there, though, and so we've uncovered one that on the surface is all humor, but there is some substance that's worth discussing from an agency perspective.
Are you ready?
With bated breath, Ginny.
I'm still a little in shock because I don't know what to make of this situation. However, a client of mine who runs a service industry business recently messaged me saying he won't be needing my SEO services anymore. Essentially, I won't read the whole thing. He says now,
which is good because he apparently doesn't know how to use paragraphs.
Right. Or punctuation for that matter. He says, now I've had this conversation with clients before who weren't happy with their ranks or how their website was progressing early on. However, the difference with this client was that his website was killing it. So when I had the conversation with him, he told me something along the lines of, well, now that I rank on the first page, I don't think we'll be needing to pay you for your monthly services anymore. It broke my heart a little as we've been working together for a while. But what should I do? Can an SEO service provide too great of results to where your customers might not need you anymore? What do I do?
First of all, snap out of it, buddy, because the idea that you're too good at what you do is like one of the most insane things I've ever heard from a business person. Like, no, you cannot be too good. It is simply not possible to be too good. You can be too arrogant, which is what it sounds like may be the case here, but you certainly cannot be too good. You may not do a good enough job, in fact, of selling the client on other things they should be doing, or maybe even understanding what they should be doing going forward. Because if you think they're going to just pay you for everything you've done in the past, you are sorely mistaken. You've got to have a plan for the future, and they've got to understand why it matters. And you haven't done that, buddy. That's why you lost the business.
Or you could take the advice of a personal trainer who says, I run my own business as a personal trainer and was finding a lot of my clients either stop training with me or dramatically reduce their volume because I was doing such a good job at making them self-sufficient. I actually toyed with the idea of doing a worse job of educating my clients.
I really, Ginny, I don't understand what goes through some people's minds. I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around all of this. And what struck me at the point where I looked at this thread, and since I've looked at this thread, there are a gazillion more comments on it. This has apparently touched a real nerve, and there are a lot of people who think that this is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. Almost nobody called out this guy and said, look, or gal, I guess we don't know whether it's a guy or a guy.
I think it's a guy.
It sounded like it, but who knows? Nobody called him out and said, dude, the problem isn't that you've done too good a job, right? They all accepted the premise that he's done too good a job, and now what? Well, no. First of all, this is one of the issues I have with SEO-only agencies generally, because most SEO-only agencies don't really paint the picture of what you need to do on an ongoing basis. They say, well, you need to keep doing backlinks and creating content or something like that, but they don't really help educate the client. And that's part of the thing. As an agency, when you're doing work for the client, you don't just do the work. You have to educate them. Mm-hmm. They have to understand the value of what they're doing. You have to help them understand what are the next steps. And by the way, those next steps shouldn't be focused on just maintaining the status quo. Those next steps should be focused on how do you take it to the next level?
Yes.
Because there's always a next level. It also is, and someone did point this out, that it might be that that this client was getting too many leads
Right.
to handle.
Right.
That can be a problem. But as an agency, you need to understand how your work is fitting into the bigger picture. And if the problem is that the work you're doing is generating too many leads that they can't handle, well, look at that. You could probably have a lower volume of leads, but higher quality, right? And that might work better, because there is no business that's going to be successful that takes in more leads than it can handle and doesn't grow, right?
Right.
If you're not growing, it's because the quality isn't there, or there's something else broken in the process. And your job as an agency, even if you don't directly control that other work, you've got to be aware of it and figure out how to work with it if you want to maintain that relationship with the client.
Well, and you brought up this at the very beginning, which is you should be looking at other opportunities. And if that's the case and there are too many leads, perhaps you help them figure out a lead scoring program, and then anybody who's on the quote unquote lower end of that scoring gets a lead nurturing program, and the client can focus on the higher end. And now you've helped not just with the lead scoring and implementing that, but you can help with the lead nurturing. And maybe that's not something you do. Maybe you have to bring in a partner to do that, or you have to refer them to somebody else, but they're always going to keep coming back to you because they trust you and they know that you're going to help them. You're going to help them solve business problems, not just an SEO problem.
I mean, I have to say, seriously, in 25 years of being in business, I don't think I have ever run across a business that is truly receiving too many leads that it can't handle unless they're garbage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. The problem is almost always the quality of the lead, not the number. And because the fact is, if you send me all of the right leads, I just take that money that I'm getting and I invest it in growth.
Right.
So there's no reason to be sitting there and assuming that is the likely cause. The more likely cause is that you didn't help the client understand what the heck you were doing, how it mattered, and how they could then continue to move forward. And so you need to be thinking about that, not when you get to this point in the conversation, because one of the things this person was looking for is, how do I go back and have a conversation? It's too late. You've lost this battle. You've lost the war.
It's way too late.
Move on. Go find another client. Right. Someone said, well, ask for a referral and help them understand how painful it is to lose their business. No, ask for a referral. Sure. Right. I mean, if you really believe that you've done such a good job for them and that's why they're not working with you anymore, absolutely ask for referrals. But don't include in there because it sucks having to lose this revenue.
Right.
I mean, that just makes you look pathetic.
Yeah,
no, that's not their problem.
Not their problem.
They are not responsible for your livelihood. You are responsible for your own livelihood. You have to figure out how to get and retain the right clients for you. Their job is to do what's right for their business, not yours.
Yeah. And when you're looking at, and this is the time of year that people start to look at expenses for the business as they go into planning for the following year. They look at that and they go, we're on the first page of Google for the keywords that we need. We are getting enough leads. We're going to be able to use this pipeline to go into next year. No, we don't need to keep paying for this. That's a business decision.
And can I let you in on a little secret, Jenny?
Yes, please.
No client lasts forever.
Nope.
None.
Nope.
They don't.
No.
Nor should they.
No.
It's not healthy for an agency to have clients that are around forever, because if they are, then the relationship probably is no longer working in your favor as the agency.
For sure.
And really agency-client relationships need to be two-way streets. It needs to be beneficial for both sides.
Yep.
If you get to a place where either the client isn't seeing the value or you're not getting the value, then it's time for that relationship to end.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I said this before we started recording, but I will say to brand new clients, our job is to make you self-sufficient in the peso model. And if we do that, then, and we help you build your internal process and organization to be able to do that, then we can go on to help you do other things. And they never believe me. And they're always like, oh, yeah, we're going to need you forever. And I always feel like we've done our job when they finally, it might be a year later, it might be 5 years later, but they finally go, you know what, we have built the internal structure to be able to do this ourselves. Now we need you to help us with X, Y, and Z. Or it's time for us to go on our way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if your clients are growing, they're going to have changes that are happening within their organization that will, at a minimum, change their relationship with you, or it may lead to it ending and moving on because there's a better fit for them, or maybe they just don't need an agency at that point in time, because not everybody needs an agency all the time.
Right.
And I know that comes as a shock to many in the agency community to think, well, everybody could use an agency. Not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily.
I mean, it really depends on what their business model is, what they're trying to accomplish, where they are in their own life cycle. And so it is your job to be, looking down the road on behalf of your clients and understanding how you fit in 6, 12, 18 months down the road. And if you are still part of that picture, the way that you're looking at it, they need to understand that, and not at the point in time when they're making their year-end decision, not when it's time to renew the contract. Yeah. They need to start seeing that well in advance. And part of the problem is that as agency folks, we often live in the moment. And part of that's because we always feel like we're drinking out of a fire hose because we don't price appropriately, which means we can't resource appropriately. And so, we're just fighting today's battle. And so, I talk to a lot of agency owners who say, I just don't have time to step back and look at the big picture. I gotta get this done. I gotta deliver results today. That's fine. But that's what leads to risk in continuing your engagement with any client, because you haven't done what you need to do to help them see what's down the road and how you fit into that. Because you want to build that anticipation from the client about your future work, not just your today work.
Yep. And I would venture to say that for the work that many of the listeners do, I think it's harder when you specialize in something like SEO or, one thing, events, media relations, whatever it happens to be, when you specialize just in one thing. I think it's harder from that perspective because it's seen as very transactional and tactical. But if you can look at it from a business perspective and say, agency owner to client business owner or client executive, we are learning these things in our business, and I think they can apply to yours, and here's how. So you start to have an elevated conversation about the business and not just about the services that you provide.
Mm-hmm. And look, there's nothing wrong with agencies that are doing time-limited services, right?
No, absolutely not.
Event management, SEO, those kinds of, you just have to understand it and build your business model around that. And the problem in this particular example seems to be that they've built a time-limited, finite project and are expecting it to go on forever.
Right.
And so if they want it to go on forever, then they need to structure it in such a way and make sure the client sees it in such a way that they understand it's ongoing. Or they need to accept that I'm just getting you from point A to point B, and then I'm handing you the keys. You may need to come to me again when you have your next event or you have your next SEO challenge, or you need to build your next website or whatever that individual project is. I'm happy to have you come back, but your business model needs to be built to that and not anticipating that I'm going to pay you to rebuild my website every month, because that doesn't happen.
No, it does not.
I mean, although I've done a lot of work for web clients, and they seem to want it rebuilt every month, because they think everybody's looking at as much as they are. But anyway, that's a whole other rant for another day.
Well, speaking of other rants for other days, one thing about this that really bothers me is that this long-term client messaged the agency owner saying they wouldn't be needing this SEO services anymore. Like, if a client messaged me and said that and essentially fired us without having a conversation with me, I would be like, where did I go wrong? Because it's disrespectful, it's rude, it means you don't want to face any conflict, it means you don't want to have a hard conversation. And I would be like, where did I go wrong in that they don't have enough respect for me and my team to be able to pick up the phone and have this conversation with me? That to me is just, and maybe that shows my age, but do not message me. If you text me and say that you're firing me, I will be
Well, just don't text me anyway. But
I know, but you don't. I don't mind the texting unless it comes from a PR person who I don't know. But
almost nobody has my text information. I don't share. A lot of people think they. A lot of people think they do. She does.
Okay.
No, my wife and kids do. My baseball umpiring assigner does. Apart from that,
that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, anyway, I don't like texting, but that's a whole nother story. But I suspect what that means, if it was a digital communication of some sort, email, text, whatever, that suggests to me that in all likelihood, and I'd be willing to bet a fair amount of money on this, they didn't have regular phone calls or in-person meetings or something like that. And so that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
I love email. I love digital communication. It's fast, it's quick, it's asynchronous. There's so many benefits to it. There's still no replacement for phone calls or Zoom or in person or those kinds of opportunities where we can engage just like the two of us are here today in a way that's more meaningful, where you can hear people's tone of voice. You can ideally see their reactions. Yeah. You're building the relationship. And so my bet is that this was a relationship built largely on digital communications, and that's why the client felt comfortable terminating the relationship that way. Now, I don't know that for sure, but I just suspect, based on my experience, that that's likely what it was. They were conditioned to communicate that way. And your job as an agency is to condition the client to communicate in the way that's best for building the relationship and getting the results that they're looking for. And that almost certainly means having phone calls and Zooms and in-person meetings. Yeah. And those are your opportunities to spot early that something's amiss. That's where you start paying attention to someone saying, so we're almost there. We've almost got our goal, right? We're almost at the number one spot. Okay, cool. What's next?
Yep.
That's what your mind should be thinking. As soon as you hear the client sound like they're talking about some end action, you need to think, oh no, what's next?
Yep. Yeah. You raise a good point. That is a fair point. And I will say, as an introvert, I prefer email, Slack, whatever it happens to be. But I have learned in the last few years that it's just not as effective because, first of all, it goes on forever. And you can't get the same amount of information or, body language or anything like that through Slack or email or text. You just can't. And so I will often say to clients, hey, can we jump on Zoom just real fast? It'll take 3 minutes. And just, we love to do Slack video because it's easy and you're right there, right? But it makes things significantly easier. You can make decisions faster. You can hear for the things that you should be listening for, and you can see body language and understand what's going on. But in Slack in text conversation, that all gets lost, and then it builds into something that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So I always say, hey, let's just jump on video real quick.
Yeah, it is incredibly beneficial, and I think that people often disparage Zoom. They disparage meetings. They're a waste of time. We have too many meetings, too many calls, blah, blah, blah. No, you've got the wrong calls, the wrong meetings, the wrong people in them.
Right.
They last too long. You don't have an agenda.
To last an hour.
The problem is not that you're having them. The problem is that they're not the right ones and they're not structured properly. If you get the right ones and they're structured properly, meetings of all kinds can be super helpful, and particularly in building the relationship that's going to cause you to keep a client and not lose them because you did way too good a job. But I think we did a good job, Jenny. I don't think we did too good a job though. Hopefully they'll be back. We can paint the picture that you'll have some more enlightening, lively conversation. I'm sure that we will have something to rant and rave about next week. No idea what that may be because we don't come up with a topic until about 30 seconds before I hit the record button. And it would be 3 seconds if it just didn't take me so long to find the button.
We have 2 pages of topic ideas that we add to. We just choose one of those before 30 seconds before.
Sure. Or we pick something like we did today, something off of our email communications, because we do use email. I email quite regularly my crazy thoughts and links I find and those kinds of things just to aggravate Jenny. And some of them turn into topics. So.
Yes, they do.
And the topics ultimately come to an end, just as this one has. And so we will draw this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast to a close. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends. Thank you for listening to the Agency Leadership Podcast. You can watch or listen to every episode by visiting agencyleadershippodcast.com. The Agency Leadership Podcast is distributed on the FIR Podcast Network. Just visit www.firpodcastnetwork.com. We welcome your feedback and suggestions and look forward to being back with you again next week.